And tonight we are going to talk about drugs, and I'm going to try to go as fast as I can because this topic, oops, let me stop sharing. Hold on. Ah, cancel. Where did I go? Oh, there I am. Sorry, I have two screens running right now as we speak. So if I'm looking this way or this way, it's usually because I'm looking at one or the other screen, two screens. I just gotta, I know they did some updates and I'm just making sure the sound, okay, there we are. And slideshow. And there we go. Okay. So, some of the topics we're going to talk about are going to be, of course, nicotine, vaping, and drinking, as well as some marijuana. If we get to, if we're able to get to some of the drugs like opiates, hopefully we can. But we're mainly going to stick because it's middle school. We're going to mainly stick to the vaping, the nicotine, and alcohol, because right now we are having an issue with binge drinking in Santa Clara County, as well as with nicotine, so and vaping and such. And it's really interesting because a lot of parents are realizing that their children have vaping addictions and they're at home all the time, and all of a sudden their kids are like leaving the house to visit a friend or to go for a walk, and they're noticing that there's certain behaviors, and we'll talk a little bit about those behaviors in a minute. Now I'm going to just jump right into it. So what is a drug? It's basically a substance that changes the way our brains and bodies think and work. I always refer to, like cough medicine. Cough medicine is a medicine. It is a drug. It makes us groggy, but it stops our cough at the same time. Now, but we need to talk mainly about the adolescent brain. And when we've already discussed some of this with your children at Quimby Oak, and we've already talked about the brain, but let's real quick, like, at what age does the brain reach full growth? And you could actually say it out. I think we have, let's see, how many individuals do we have here? Ah, let me move this. Okay, we got a few people in here. So at what age? 10, 15, 18, or 25? Who knows the answer? Everybody's shy.
You can
Nope.
also use the chat feature at the bottom of the screen and type your answer with just a letter.
Ah, we got one. Yay. Okay, we got B, we got 15, we got 15. Okay, very good. Now, the actual answer is, come on, I know you want to work, 23 to 25 years old. So we're looking at 25 when the brain is actually the prefrontal cortex is what actually controls choices and consequences. I know a lot of times we're always asking our kids, "Why did you do that?" or "What's wrong with you?" And it's because the front part of the brain is not done developing. So between a 5-year-old and a 20-year-old, the maturity level, the prefrontal cortex. So when we talk about this, I always like to refer like a child that's 5 years old. They have issues with their anger and controlling that anger. Well, that's because they're not mature. They don't know the consequences to some of their actions. Versus a 20-year-old, they kind of know already, hey, if I do this, this is going to happen. So it's the maturity level. But what we're seeing is when children actually start becoming addicted to certain types of drugs, and can you guys see my mouse right there in the screen? I don't know. Sometimes some people see it, some people do not.
Yes.
So yes. Okay. And but what happens is we're noticing is that children, once they become addicted to certain types of drugs, their brain actually will remain in this section. So the preteen and or the teen. So they're stuck in that their brain is basically stuck at that maturity level because of the drugs. The drugs prevent and or don't allow the brain to heal. Okay, so they're stuck in between a preteen and a teen, or between a teen and a 25-year-old. So why do kids take drugs? A lot of it is, we kind of know this already, the stress, the low self-esteem. There is tons of misinformation out there. especially when it comes to marijuana. We're seeing just because it's legal doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. There's a reason why you have to wait to your certain age. And or we hear, oh, it's a medicine. Well, it is a medicine, but there are different types of medication, CBD versus THC, which I'll go over later. And then social acceptance. A lot of times it's because, the individual, they want to be a part of the group. So they do it. And then also to easy access. It may be, may be within individuals' homes. Now, the brain's reward system, that's the other thing. Some of us, as adults, can probably remember the first time we've tried alcohol, if we did, or smoked a cigarette, it created a memory. Now, for me, the smoking of a cigarette, it made me feel really, lightheaded. It kind of made me feel good, but at the same time, it aggravated my asthma. So I didn't get a good reward system. So, but the scary thing is, these children are more susceptible to that reward. So, if it makes them feel good that first time, chances are they're going to try it again. Okay, they're going to try it again. And this is where we see addicts too, where addicts they may try a drug, they like the way it makes them feel, but our body fights back. It builds up tolerance levels. And so what ends up happening is that we want more of the drug more of the time, because we're not getting that same high. And so eventually, this is how we get, the drug addicts, is because eventually they turn to different types of drugs. Okay. Now, I love this one. What is the chemical in alcohol? Is it ethanol, xymase, fructose, or nicotine? You guys can use the chat section right there. I lost you guys. There you are. You guys can use the chat. Okay, A. That's a pretty easy one. Ethanol is the actual drug. Now, this is the interesting thing about alcohol. Now, all the information we get. I'm gonna backstep a little bit. Is that we go through the Stanford training in regards to the drugs that we learn about. We all of us were annually we go to these trainings, Stanford, and it's open to teachers and counselors too as well. The Stanford Toolkit. And so we go through them, we go through the training. This year, I don't know what, it's probably be Zoom. But one of the things I learned, which was really interesting, is which is the following is a special concern for teenagers in alcohol abuse. Alcohol abuse. Is it A, B, C, or D? Let's see. You could just put in the chat. Everybody's quiet. A. Okay. Now, for adults, it is actually A, but for children, it's bone. Wow, we got a D. We got bone and muscle damage. Bone and muscle damage. Now, I'm not going to really talk about how long it gets, but it's usually 90 seconds to get into our brain. Now, alcohol is a depressant. That's why we don't drink and drive, but it impairs the body and impairs the judgment of children as well as adults. But the thing about alcohol is that it does affect their brain. So it's 10% smaller in underage drinkers. So we've noticed this over and over again, that children who abuse alcohol, their brains are 10% smaller. So thus causing, hey, guess what? They're not going to be as smart as their peers, and or they're going to have social problems in regards to that. Now, let me go back. Binge drinking. So this is what we were talking about in class 2 as well, is that the cases for binge drinking. Santa Clara County, especially in this area, we're having an issue with teens binge drinking. Now, what that means is for females, it's actually 4 drinks in 2 hours, or 5 drinks in 2 hours for males. And I love this because I've shared this with different classes. I shared this with different parents as well. Is if you don't think your children is going to be around a person that binge drinks, I hate to break it to you, it's either going to happen either in college or in high school. I've sheltered my boys, and I got older boys, I got younger boys, but I've sheltered my boys, and it's really, really sad, because I had one son actually call me in the middle of the night going, mom, at college, he went to Chapman University, And he tells me, he goes, Mom, he goes, my roommate, he came home and he's just passed out. And of course I'm like, no, you need to call 911. And he wasn't responding. I told him to put him on his side. I said, you need to hang up, call 911, have them come and take him away. And as they were taking him away, he was actually going into seizures. And I don't know exactly what happened to that child afterwards. I know he did get counseling, but here, my son, this happened to him. And then another time, that in the case of binge drinking, my other son went to, and I'm not going to say the school and throw out a school, but a private school. It was supposed to be a get together, and sure enough, there was a girl passed out. And he right away, calls me after he called the police. He calls me and he goes, Mom, I'm on my way home. And as he's saying that, I could hear the sirens, and I could hear, from where I was, because I was only a couple blocks away. And I'm thinking, oh, he's just at a friend's house. He'll be fine. But, and it was really, really sad, but he called the cops because he saw this female that was, just sprawled out in the front yard, due to alcohol because of the binge drinking. And I always love it when parents tell me, well, not my child, not my child. It may not be your child, but your child may be around it, or may be confronted with individuals who are drinking or are in this situation. Okay. Questions? Do we have any questions? No? So I have a few videos in here. This is one parent. Some of them work, some of them don't. It depends on the technology. So that's why I have a lot of videos and some of my PowerPoints. Hopefully this one works. Keep your fingers crossed. There it goes.
It was a Friday night, and I got a phone call from her father at about 9:30 at night saying that Taylor was in trouble. When my ex-husband came home, he found her on the kitchen floor. She tried to get up and fell, and he couldn't wake her up. And that's when he started to panic and knew he needed to get her to the hospital. I got to the hospital, and they rushed me into the emergency room where Taylor was, and she was on life support. She was not breathing on her own. She was on a ventilator. She was covered with warming blankets. Her body temperature was 95 degrees. Her lips were almost blue. I mean, she looked like she was pulled out of a lake. Her organs were on the verge of shutting down. They did a full tox screen on her, and alcohol was all that was in her system. She was at a 0.43, more than 5 times the legal limit. The doctor told me, had my ex-husband taken 10 minutes longer, she wouldn't have lived. And we started asking, would she be okay? And they couldn't answer that. They didn't know if she would wake up at all.
Here to discuss their story, which has now been shared over 750,000 times on Facebook, Taylor and her mother, Kelly Jo, are here, and we are blessed, Taylor, that you're here with us. When I saw what your blood alcohol level was, 0.43, for someone who's naive to alcohol, as an ER doctor, I was surprised in a way that you were alive. Because you went through 8 shots, 3 beers, berries that have been soaked in hard alcohol, and it probably hit you so quick you don't even remember, do you?
I remember the first 15 minutes of it, and after that, I just remember some flashes.
Yeah. And Taylor, was this your first time drinking, or had you been taking a little out of the bar every now and then? But this was...
I had been taking a little bit, but that was the first time that I actually got, like, really drunk.
Yeah. Was that the last time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could imagine. That's good.
And Taylor, you actually, without knowing it, taught every child out there watching right now, when you drink liquor, it has to pass through your GI tract, get absorbed, get to your brain, and there can be about a 15 to 30 minute delay. And what I'm assuming you were doing shots, and before you knew it, before you even knew you were drunk, you had too much to drink. The only reason you survived is because you got to the hospital where they were able to intubate you and protect your airway, because what happens when you drink too much is the most basic functions you lose. The ability to protect your airway, the desire to breathe. And so one of the quick things to look out for, these are 2 words, must help. Just remember these: mental confusion, unresponsiveness, snoring or gasping for air, throwing up, hypothermia like Taylor had, a cold body temperature, erratic breathing, loss of consciousness, And lastly, paleness or blueness of skin. If you encounter someone who looks that way, call 911, not in a minute, that very second.
Don't
Get
let
them
them
to a
sleep. Don't let them
hospital.
sleep it off.
That's right.
Because they may not wake up.
Hey, I'm Dr. Travis Storm.
Okay, stop it there. But I mean, this is, you know, a conversation, and I've had this conversation with my children. You know, what do you do? You know, if someone, if you're there and someone is, had too much to drink for alcohol. And, I've had these conversations before they went off to college, before they started high school. Continuing that conversation with your children to say, it may not happen to you, but it may happen to your friend. It may happen to a roommate. These are conversations that we have with our children, and have them call, the police department, because it may be, a life and death situation. Now, I'm going to go really, really fast on the surveys, but what drug kills the most people in the United States? Is it A, cocaine, heroin, tobacco, or alcohol? Everybody always, and I've done these same questions with the children too as well. But what do you guys think? Okay, we see tobacco. Okay, D. Okay, alcohol. You guys are close. Okay. Actually, tobacco is the number one, followed by alcohol. So you guys are real good about that. And then cigarette smoke contains, and I'm going to tell you guys that one, 4,000 chemicals, 4,000 chemicals. So, just be aware. And some of them, I mean, we kind of already know what's in cigarette smoke. So we know, what's happening there. Now, a puff of cigarette, it takes about 8 seconds. But here's the interesting thing. Electric vaping devices like e-cigarettes can help keep teens away from real cigarettes. True or false? True or false? False. Okay. So let me go to the thing. It's basically false. What's happening, if kids cannot get their hands on vaping devices, now they're moving on to cigarettes. So moving on to cigarettes. That's what we're seeing. Now, nicotine is basically brain poison. It causes basically the lack of blood flow of oxygenated blood going into the brain. So that's what causes the lightheadedness in children. But we do know it does change the brain's chemistry, the attention span, learning, and memory. When we used to present drug presentations to students, in-person presentations, usually around brunch, especially high school, especially when we used to teach the high school level, especially around brunch, lunch, and right before school, kids start getting antsy. They start playing with things. They start moving around. Well, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that means that, hey, this kid already has that nicotine addiction. And because after a few hours, the nicotine, they don't have it in their system anymore. They start getting anxious. They can't pay attention. They try to focus. They can't focus because the nicotine is so overwhelming in their body. The average age that it's still the same is 12.5. 12.5 is the average age. And we have here, and it was interesting, we were just talking about these cigarettes. I was talking about cigarettes with my husband, and we're talking 12.5, the average age. But why do certain people actually smoke? And it really had to do with the advertisements that are aimed at children. So what was happening is we almost had it down to less than, it was almost down to 0 with teenagers actually smoking. And so, but what happened is the smoking companies knew this too. And they weren't getting these kids hooked at 12.5 anymore. So that's what they came up with, vaping. So it's really interesting. And then they come up with all these are actually mods. And then we got electrical pins, and I'll talk a little bit about these. So, they came out with these things, making it sound like it was healthier, but the FDA will not say it will help you cease from smoking. So, that was just one of the things. They came up with this. They even called it with the better name, vapes. Interesting thing is those are cig lights. Usually the ones that look like cigarettes, those are one-time use. Then you have mid-size that look like pins, and then you got the tanks and mods, and then you got the pod and mods. And the interesting thing about this, they made these things look like pins, like USBs, and like highlighters. When I first saw the one on the black one, all the way to the right, I honestly thought that was one of those highlighting pins. And I was like shocked that it wasn't. And so they're made to look in, if they're made to actually be hidden, they're made to look discreet. Now, and it's, they weren't made for adults, they were made for the purpose of addicting children, and it's American Lung Association if you guys want to see that. So, and not to mention the flavorings. So they gave the flavorings, strawberry, mint, creme brulee, some of the flavors. Now, as adults, if I am trying to seize smoking a cigarette, or this is much healthier, supposedly, I would want something that tasted like cigarettes. An addict's gonna want something that tastes and smells like their drug of choice. And so these, we already, it's been proven over and over again that the flavorings were meant to actually, introduce it to children so they could get the children addicted. Now, we did have legislation. Now it's put on hold. It was supposed to come in on January 2021, where they are not allowed to actually have juice flavored, candy flavored, well, we call it juicing, but e-flavors. So, but that's now put on hold because now they want to send it to the voters. So please be aware, that it's going to be on the ballot. Now, smoking secondhand aerosol. Now, here's the interesting thing about vaping. They can tell you what is in the ingredients, okay, of these vaping cigarettes. But, and this is from Stanford Toolkit, but by law, they don't have to tell you what they're creating after the fact. So I could tell you, hey, if I smoke it, this is if the product itself before smoking, these are the ingredients. But after you smoke it, I don't have to tell you those ingredients. So, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those ingredients. But yay, I hope this video works.
If someone were to go on the Juul Labs website, you would see that they list some of these ingredients. So nicotine is found in the e-juice of a Juul pod. Benzoic acid, this is an important one because when we talk about salt-based nicotine, you need benzoic acid in order to create the salt-based nicotine. Glycerol and propylene glycol are really common in e-juices. So if someone were to look at a bottle of e-juice or a cartridge of e-juice, you would probably find these ingredients. And these are helping aerosolize the actual juice. Natural oils, extracts, and flavors are also listed. And then I have these question marks because I don't know what else is in the actual pod. And they don't mention anything about the chemicals that are aerosolized. So if you heat up chemicals, you're going to break down bonds and actually change chemicals. You'll form new ones. And this is something that the company does not mention or share with the public. So there was this lab that studied the Juul pods, all the different flavors, and looked at how many ingredients were in there. So they found 59 chemicals, which is a very different story from what the company is saying on their website. So the ones you see at the top in red are known for being the most toxic, are dangerous to the environment and to your health. So if someone is breathing in a lot of these chemicals, what we know from the laboratory is that these are not good for you. The ones you are seeing in orange are not as toxic as the ones in red, but are also harmful to your health. And the ones you're seeing in blue are described as irritants. So that can cause inflammation in your body. So if someone's breathing in a lot of these blue chemicals, your body will respond in a negative way. It's unfortunate that the company doesn't share this with us because I'm sure people would think twice about using this if they saw the e-juice ingredients. There was this article about how Harvard University had studied a contamination that had occurred in Juul pods. These Juul pods contain something called glucan, which is a microbial toxin. So there are small bacteria that produce this chemical, and this can cause a reaction in the lungs. Glucan is known for inflaming or causing inflammation of the lung airways. It would be damaging your lungs basically. So I just want you to think about some of these chemicals because not all of them have been studied in detail. Even if someone is not directly breathing in or using an e-cigarette, the people around you are still being exposed to this thing called secondhand aerosol, which is very similar to secondhand smoke. So obviously someone would find nicotine or could be exposed to that. Also, they have found that secondhand aerosol contains heavy metals, and heavy metals are cancerous to your body. So these aren't something you want to breathe in. Also, there are chemicals classified as ultrafine particles. So those are very tiny microscopic chemicals that can penetrate deep into your lungs. And your lungs aren't designed like your stomach where they can break down these chemicals. A lot of the times they just sit there and this residue is being left behind and doing damage to your lungs. Also, there are other cancerous chemicals that they have identified in secondhand aerosol, along with something called VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. So anything that is an aerosol or a mixture of chemicals leaves behind a residue. When those chemicals are being left behind, that residue, your pets, our younger siblings, our toddlers could be exposed to that. So this is another layer to talking about aerosol. We have to think about these chemicals and how they're interacting with the environment. So not only does someone have to worry about the chemicals and what the damage it does directly to your lungs from using or walking by someone who's using, but you have to think about where someone is using and how those chemicals are going to be left behind and can potentially do damage to someone's health.
Okay, so I mean, it's really interesting that now we really right now we don't, they're barely getting the scientific studies about the secondhand aerosol. So they're studying it, they're seeing what's coming out of these vape pens, but we don't know how it's going to really affect or how long before it's going to start affecting other individuals who are not smoking but are around the people who vape. It also causes something called dry mouth. I always say a dentist will always tell you, they know when you don't floss. They know when, when you go to a dentist, they know when you haven't been taking care of your teeth. They know, even though you're like telling them, hey, I floss all the time. But they also can give you a hint of what drugs you're actually using. And one of the things that, they're noticing with people who vape a lot is the dryness of a mouth. And so not only are their mouth becoming dry, but if you don't have that saliva to fight the bacteria, then you're going to have excess bacteria, which you're going to have, your teeth are going to actually get destroyed faster. And so we're seeing more of this in the news, just various pictures. I love showing these pictures to kids, but I'm going to show them to adults too. We're noticing that people who smoke and start vaping, and we're also noticing people who vape who are now seeing it in their teeth. Okay, so it does affect not just your insides, but it's also affecting your teeth. Now, what is vaping? And we know it is not real vapor. We know it contains heavy metals. The atomizer, like I said, they only have to tell you what's in the liquid. They don't have to tell you what happens if you heat the e-cigarettes, what chemicals you're creating. Okay, so it is actually the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, the ultrafine, the nicotine, of course, and the cancer causing, but a lot of heavy metals, okay, such as nickel, tin, and lead. And that's what's causing something called EVALI, which also to popcorn lung. We're going to talk about, popcorn lung. Diacetyl is actually the flavoring. So this is it's basically irritating the tiny air passages so that people are actually getting something called popcorn lung, and literally their lungs are popping, and it's really, all of a sudden their lungs just collapse. So we're seeing that, but we also, it's called EVALI. So this is lung injury. So when an individual is vaping, they will and they're going into the hospital, it will be categorized as EVALI, okay? And so the cough, the chest pain, the shortness of breath, not to mention teens who vape are 3.5 times more likely to use marijuana. So we're seeing them move not only from the vapes, but we're seeing them move on to marijuana as well. So this is just a good example of teenagers are hospitalized. We were keeping track of this for many years. I think we were at 400 and something, or 2,400 or something by the end of, or actually by the beginning of last year. But then because of COVID, then all of a sudden we had to, we stopped. So some of the adverse, 2,807, that was in March, okay, of last year. Now I'll explain a little bit about how COVID is affected. So the mouth and airways, irritation, cough, increased airway resistance. The nicotine is causing the heart to pump a little bit faster because nicotine is a stimulant. It makes our heart beat a little bit faster. So there increased blood pressure and increased heart rate. And then the diacetyl actually is known to cause vomiting and nausea because of the chemical in itself, because that what we're breathing in that chemical, it may make our stomach a little upset. So the thing is, and I just got this from August of this year, what we noticed is that those who vape were 5 to 7 times more likely to be infected than those who did not. So we're seeing COVID actually 5 to 7 times with people who vape. Do we have any questions so far? No? Okay. Data, and it just shows about COVID from Stanford. Now, brain size matters. Once again, nicotine, we're noticing the prefrontal cortex is smaller in people who abuse nicotine, alcohol, and marijuana. We're seeing that happen more and more, especially with the marijuana. So once again, nicotine tastes like candy, but works like poison. So what we have here is an actual video, because we're talking about some of these the side effects that may happen to some individuals, but there are other things that may happen with these e-cigarettes.
The video's viral, capturing the very real danger of e-cigarettes, explosions and malfunctions leading to serious injuries, and tonight, a Texas man's death. 24-year-old William Eric Brown was sitting in his car when his e-cig exploded and cut a major artery in his neck, according to the medical examiner's report. His death now the second in the U.S. blamed on e-cigs. While fatal e-cig incidents are rare, explosions are not. In 2 years, U.S. hospitals reported 2,035 injuries from vaping. The problems center around lithium-ion batteries that power the devices, which the FDA says can overheat, especially if the wrong charger is used. Morgan Chesky, NBC News.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out.
I got a good question. What are some signs or symptoms parents will be able to see that lets them know their child may be vaping or drinking? How should you talk to them about it? I think this an age appropriateness when it comes to them, but when they are, think of, especially if they're addicted to nicotine, you're going to notice changes in them after a few hours. They're antsy, they get nervous, they start playing, moving their legs a lot, they start playing with certain things, or move, especially with their hands, or they're playing with their mouth a lot, because they want the cigarette, they need even the habit of it. So when it comes to drinking, that's another thing too as well, because they may see adults drink, and why is it okay for you but not for me, or that is one of the excuses. I like I said before, if I have 3 boys, and I always try to compare it to a chocolate cake. Okay, as an adult, if there's chocolate cake in front of me, I'm only going to take a piece. I'm not going to eat the whole thing. Okay, because if I eat the whole thing, I'll get sick. Okay, I'll get sick. And with alcohol, it's the same thing. I may have a glass of wine or a beer, but I'm not going to do it to excess. And they learn from us, they learn from other people. So, you open that conversation with them. Have you seen, other people drink? Not to mention the media, social media in general, what is aimed towards you. Some of you guys talk to your children about social media. I always tell parents, hey, look at their what advertisements your kids are getting on their computers, because that tells you where they've been, who they follow, YouTubers who they follow, look at these YouTubers. What type of advertisements are directed to them? Because sometimes they're getting those advertisements. The social media influencers get paid for posting advertisements of certain vapes, certain alcohol. We'll see it a lot. And for example, and I'm glad you brought that up, because this is something you have to talk to about your children, talking to them about social media in general. Camel, that was, if you guys remember, Camel was one of the ones we used to have. Jenna, do you remember Camel? Or are you too young? She wrote, yay. Some of us may remember Camel. This was aimed to, basically was proven on the Supreme Court that this was aimed towards children. But they would do things like this. You'd see nice skinny girls, smoking, long thin cigarettes. And you saw them in magazines. But the thing is, I used to follow Kylie Jenner, and back in the day, and I got this advertisement, and I got advertisements on Juul just because I followed her. I followed her because of her makeup, but guess what? She gets paid for posting those advertisements aimed towards your children. Okay. So, it's really, really scary. Look at your children's, social media, look and see, hey, who are they following, especially on YouTube? I know kids don't watch TV anymore. They watch YouTube. And talk to them about what type of advertisements are out there. And I think I did refer to you guys the Social Dilemma, which is another information in regards to how they use your information to send these advertisements towards you. So just to get some more examples of this, is an Instagram where they're basically, the tobacco companies, the vaping companies are paying these social media influencers to put their ads on there. We already saw this video. Here's just another explosion. And the reason why they explode, this is a Louis Vuitton purse here. The reason why they explode, I'll stop it. Before I show the rest of these are very graphic. But the reason why these actually do explode is because they're not purchased legally. They're getting them from a cousin. They're getting it from, various places. They're getting it from the internet. I always tell parents, look out for packages. I know, they all of a sudden you're getting these, well, what's in the package, So those are things you have to be aware. Look what the packages are in. A lot of these batteries that explode, they come from other countries. Not to mention, even for things that are made within this country, the vaping pins, there is a long, if you guys have a chance later on, look at vaping precautions, and it will tell you, it's like 2 or 3 pages long, and I got bored after the first page. You can't hold the vape too close to another electronic equipment. It can't get too hot. It can't get too cold. Too much saliva can cause it to do this and that. And there's all kinds of different precautions that you have to take just for these vape pens. Hence, that's why they're exploding. So we have seen this. This is one individual, more individuals who've actually gotten, that they've exploded in their mouths. This one, I don't have the notes here, but she was holding, she put the purse on her side, had her daughter, her 3-year-old daughter, Melissa, I'm trying to remember her last name, but she had her 3-year-old daughter when the pin exploded in her purse and caused that and that on her face. 2nd-degree burns to her and her child. So, and she wasn't even smoking it. So, I'm going to go a little bit faster. Now, marijuana. I love it because a lot of kids will say, well, it's a medicine. It's a medicine. But in reality, it's always been a medicine. And children don't seem to understand that it's always, but it was prescribed only for cancer patients or individuals who were actually dying. And it actually went around. The voters are the ones that voted it in. The FDA had nothing to do with it. And technically, it is still considered illegal to have on a federal level. National or statewide, yeah, you can have it. But even if you go to a federal park and you have the marijuana on you, like you say you go to Yosemite, they can actually arrest you on a felony for having that marijuana. So a lot, and then there's a lot of kids will tell me, well, you know what? Well, you can't die from, ingesting or smoking marijuana. No, but you're more likely to die doing something stupid, which happened to this individual.
Vaping could be to blame for nearly 100 severe lung illnesses. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention just announced an investigation. Vaping.
I'm sorry, that's the other one. We're not going to have time for that one, but I will show that a little bit later. So I'm going to go really, really fast because I notice I only have 15 minutes. The active chemical is THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. And then we're also noticing too, the quality of marijuana has been affecting the quality of the sperm of males and their ability to father a child. It takes about 10 minutes for them to feel a high. Now, the mixed messages that they're receiving, it's not addictive. No, it's psychologically addictive. People who do not have the marijuana in their system are they're frustrated. They have trouble communicating. They easily get upset or angry because the drug is not in their system. And I always share this with the kids too. I have doctors, I have lawyers, I have police officers in my family. I have scientists in my family. I also have drug addicts in my family. And I can honestly tell you that when one individual in my family does not have that drug in their system, they are not a nice person. They're constantly yelling. They're constantly where I don't even want to be around that individual, and I choose not to. And the sad thing is that they, in order for them just to feel normal, and that's what usually happens with the marijuana, they will use the drug. It is a medicine. It legally the CBD. So for it to be considered a medicine per se is Marinol. Marinol is legally the only medicine. Now, CBD, we see that all over the place. It has to have it can have more than 0.3% of THC, which is, it's not that much. So you may see CBD. And then kids will say, well, hemp and there's different types of plants. There's females, there's males. But the marijuana we have now is made by the collectives. And the sad thing is they are scientifically and chemically made stronger than the drugs from 10 to 20 years ago. So we're seeing THC it's almost 99%, which is really scary in regards to the drug. It's legal for 21 and older, and only in the state of California, Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, and there's a few. But once again, federally, it can affect you. Federally, if a child is actually under the age of 21, and I always share this with parents and teachers, and they are busted with marijuana on them, when it is time to apply for scholarships and such, or FAFSA, which is the financial aid portion, or the college will decide how much to give your child at their college. You will be disqualified if they have marijuana on them, because federally FAFSA is it's federal scholarships basically. So understand that, talk to your kids about that. Talk about, hey, you get busted with it, chances are it could affect your future out of college. It's natural. I always say arsenic is natural too. And the thing is though, kids will do their research and they will go online and say, hey, is marijuana addictive? Well, if we know social media is going to put the ads first. It's going to put the ads of the collectives first. So all your children are going to see is it's okay to use, it's fine to use, and blah, blah, blah. And then you go to maybe a little bit down, and then you'll see Stanford and Harvard and, JAMA. You'll see all that, but it takes a while. So, and then never killed anyone, that's a fallacy too as well. Now, what you can see, and I'm going to show you, and this is where you were talking about how do you know that your child is actually using. So we have red or glassy eyes, poor distance perception, slow non-reactive pupil, flush, their green tongue, dry lips. Once again, pay attention to their mouth. Their dry mouth will tell you a lot. Poor balance, mild trousers, and this is just when they are under the influence. So I have here's an example of some eyes that we have right now. So as you can see, a normal eye right here, and then you're noticing there's red, and it's red. Okay, so pay attention to the eyes, and I have a few minutes, and I'll show that video. So THC is added to some vape pens. We are noticing that and the potency level is crazy high. So remember, they're genetically engineered to be stronger for individuals. So here's a quick video that I was going to show you.
Another death in Colorado is being blamed partially on marijuana intoxication.
Tonight, CBS 4 investigator Brian Moss takes a closer look at the growing evidence ingesting marijuana is causing some bad outcomes.
He was a great kid. Everybody loved him.
Daniel Juarez was an 18-year-old soccer standout, making Brighton High School's varsity as a freshman. But in 2012, Daniel smoked pot with a friend and went crazy. He died within minutes.
If he wouldn't have smoked that marijuana that night, he would still be here.
Law enforcement and medical accounts obtained by CBS 4 support Erica Juarez's conclusion about her brother. While smoking pot that night, Daniel Juarez told a friend he was too high. "I just had an epiphany," said Juarez. Then he lost it. An autopsy showed 38 nanograms of THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, in his body. That's 8 times the legal limit for pot impairment. No other substances were detected. The coroner wrote that marijuana intoxication led to his suicide.
So if you're going to sit there and tell me that if you smoke too much and you get too high, you're going to fall asleep on the couch, then yeah, I'm definitely going to tell you you're wrong. Because that's not the case.
So I'm going to stop it there. And then it talks about that they are, and Colorado was one of the first that legalized marijuana, and a lot of their information, usually what happens in Colorado is going to happen here. And one of the things that happened too as well was the edibles. So we saw all of a sudden a rise in edibles. And so the scary thing about it is the dosage. Children don't understand there is dosage on the labels, or they don't know that it's in baked goods. And I always talk to your kids. You can't actually get snacks from people anymore. So they're not allowed to, share snacks. And some of the packaging, even though legally you're not supposed to have them, looked like regular candy bars, look like just normal food that we'd probably have, but they are infused with THC. Now, this one right here, the Edipure, if you look very closely, it tells you only one gummy. I don't know about you guys, but I can't eat one gummy. But the thing is, the kids are like, "Oh, I don't feel anything. Oh, I don't feel anything." So they're eating more and more because they don't feel the high, because it's going through our digestive system. Therefore, it's going to take longer for us to feel the effects. And so this is where we see overdoses with children in regards to that. So once again, talk to your kids, tell them they shouldn't be, take food or drinks from other people. This is another good example of, it looks like a candy bar, but it's actually infused with THC. Cake pops, that's another thing too as well. They're infused, these ones are infused with THC too. This is popcorn, and I showed this one because this package, you can only eat 2 kernels. So, and once again, I don't know about you guys, but I can't eat just 2 kernels. And so, but the kids are not going to read the labels. And a lot of times they're like, "I'm going to eat more," because they don't feel the side effects. Now, I don't think
tonight the family
that one, but we are also seeing a connection between weed and mental illness. They're just not sure if it was the mental illness came first or the marijuana. So, but we are noticing that people who, because the high levels of THC, we are seeing that there is psychosis later in adulthood or sooner. And we're seeing this more and more in individuals. But then there's some individuals too who self-medicate with the marijuana as well. So we're seeing both at the same time, and there still needs to be more studies on this. But we're seeing healthy individuals that aren't healthy mentally, are so-called normal. But what's happening is that all of a sudden they try the THC and now they're stuck in a permanent psychosis, or all of a sudden schizophrenia. So here's a good example, and I'll talk about that. We have a healthy brain here, and this is a 28-year-old marijuana, and just on weekends. This individual, he has been smoking since the age of 16, smoking marijuana. No oxygenated blood is going to the body. Now, another thing too, as well, I'm going to go back, is we're seeing amotivational syndrome, where they're lazy all the time. They don't want to do anything. They don't, they don't want to, all they want to do is sleep. So this is a common syndrome for a lot of students. They just lose interest in everything else, their goals. They're, just studying, sports, even video games. I've seen some individuals with video games. Now, let me go back. So this is what we're talking about, the schizophrenic brain scan versus a marijuana use brain scan. So they're very similar, which is pretty scary. And, but once again, unless you put, individuals under a CAT scan, we won't be able to see this for sure. But there are similars when we see the schizophrenic with the marijuana use, we're seeing the same kind of damage in the brain. Now, another thing too, we're noticing that the THC actually affects the reproductive organs. So with males and females. So what we're seeing is that the THC is changing the structure of the sperm and the sperm health. So you may have the same amount of sperm, but not in regards to quality. So we're seeing two-headed sperm, we're seeing sperm with two tails with these individuals. So they may have the same amount of sperm, but it's just deformed sperm. We're also seeing a lot of cases where for the females, it stays in their eggs. And so they're gonna have issues with, reproducing later on. And the scary thing too, as well, is that even if the female doesn't smoke marijuana, but the male does, there's a higher chance of miscarriage too as well. So for the female, even though she doesn't smoke. So we're seeing that too as well. And then also too, Canada did some wonderful studies. Well, they're not so wonderful, but where females who actually smoke marijuana, even if they quit and they have children, the children are the first 5 years, but after the first 5 years, they're not able to, their children aren't able or not as smart as the average bear or their peers. Another thing we do know that, and that just came out about 2 years ago, is individuals who smoke marijuana, their children will be 2 IQ points dumber than them. That's another interesting study that came out at Stanford. So one other thing too that we're noticing is because they're lowering their male hormone too as well, when they smoke marijuana, that we're seeing the side effect of man boobs. So the males are going to start using more of their estrogen because of the lower testosterone. So some individuals, especially teens who are like 14 or 15, when they're in the middle of puberty, they may not grow to their full potential, and they may be stuck with, man boobs, honestly. So we're seeing that more and more. Colorado seeing more of it, and once again now Colorado seeing more of it, and now we're seeing high levels of individuals going in for plastic surgery to reduce that. So we're seeing also too marijuana and mixing with alcohol. Please, when children are with under this, I would just call 911. I'm just going to go really, really fast. Another thing that you need to be aware of is the mixing of cough medicines. If you have medicines or opiates or any type of pain meds, I always say keep them in a place where your children don't know they're at, or lock them up and keep. A lot of kids are mixing the drinks with soda. So they're mixing the cough medicine with soda, and or they're taking the pain meds, diluting them into the sodas and getting drunk off that way too as well. Often we hear about it. We'll see it on YouTube videos. We'll see it in music videos. Opiates. How much time? I have 2 minutes. Okay. Opiates. Vicodin, Oxycontin. Please, once again, if you have these in your home, or if we've had a case where a grandmother actually had to call the cops on her grandson because he was taking her pain meds away. So even when they, with grandparents, pay attention how much, pain meds you have in the house. Now, I'm not gonna go inhalants too. These are household items that are within your house. That they're not drugs, they're poisonous fumes or gases, but children like gas, glue. The children will inhale them on purpose just to produce the high. And all it does is just take the oxygen out of your system and puts the poisonous fumes in, which causes that individual to get a high. They're basically drowning their brain. Now, one thing I'm not going to talk about NBC or doping, but how do kids hide drugs? Once again, I've seen it all. Water bottles, pins, various things, lipsticks. Spencer's drugs, or Spencer's. I don't know if you guys have ever gone into Spencer's, and you're supposed to be 18 to actually go in there, but they have all this, or they could purchase it online. This is where we're talking, hey, you know what? This may, if that's why you have to look at those packages that your children have. Another thing too is when they come home, and this goes into how do you see if they are abusing drugs. Whenever both of my older boys, they're already in college in a way, but when they would come home, I was awake when they came home. I stood by the door and I would greet them. I'd give them a big old hug, and I smell them, and then I look at their face and I'm glad you got home so nice and safely. And then I look in their eyes, feel their pulse, because I would pay attention. Luckily, I didn't have to worry about that. But I would check that on them, and they're like, Mom, don't you trust me? Mom, you don't. And it's not that I don't trust them. I know kids can make mistakes. I know it just takes that one mistake or that one kid to, tell them, they fall for it, or they fall into that peer pressure. I've seen the smartest kids. I've seen, the kids coming from the healthiest families actually been drunk or been high. And it's not nice, but they make a mistake. So, let them know, this is just one of the things, let them know that, hey, when you come home, I'm going to be awake. I'm going to be here for you regardless. And you may not, let them know you're doing it. It's up to you. My kids knew I was doing it. But it's just because I know, don't ever say never my kid, never my kid. Just when it could be anybody's kid, regardless of occupation, regardless of, where you live, how much love you give them, they may make that one mistake. So start talking to them little by little, ask them questions, ask them what they know, about drugs, because then they may open up and talk to you about it. So I always say, when you're talking to your child, the best way to talk to a child is side by side. Because if you're standing up over them when you're talking to them about drugs, they're like, you're scolding them. The best way to talk to a child is side by side. Now, do you guys I know it's 7 o'clock and I went really, really fast. 7:01. Do you guys have any questions?
If you have any questions, but you're not comfortable putting it in the chat to everyone, you can also do a private message or question to Sandra Garcia.
Thank you. I kind of went really fast at the end. Excuse me.
Or you can also unmute and go ahead and state your question.
Actually, the presentation is getting recorded. So I think, Ms. Hammond, you're gonna put it on for parents to see.
I have a recording of it and I can share it, yeah.